The fight for our freedoms will take hard work. Joining us now is Caroline Randall Williams, award-winning poet, essayist, and educator. She's the writer-in-residence at Vanderbilt University. Caroline, welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Ali.
There are so many thoughts swirling around the heads of all of us, all of our viewers. You're putting some of them together. You're trying to do what only somebody like you can do. You've got such access to words. What are the thoughts swirling around your head right now?
So the thoughts that are swirling in my head are, first of all, thank you for showing that clip of Vice President Harris. She is a guiding light. Mm-hmm. She's also an optimist. She said, it's going to be okay. And I think I would modify that and say, it can still be okay if we fight for it. Mm-hmm. You know, Benjamin Franklin, he left Constitutional Hall and he said we had a republic if we can keep it. It was never a guarantee. And, you know, I think that for me, I just keep on reflecting on the fact that the founding freedom document of this country, the Declaration of Independence, was written by a man who owned his own children. So, and he wasn't even sure that this experiment would last by the time he was rounding the final corners of his life. He wrote to somebody, and he wrote to John Holmes from Maine in 1820 that he thought he was sorry to see that the hard work of the class of 76 was going to be wasted on the unwise and unworthy passions of their sons, and that he was just relieved that he wouldn't live to see it. So I'm just, you know, it can be okay. It can still be okay, but I have no idea if it will. You know, to me, I watched on Tuesday and I thought, you know, America is just this old junkie who can't seem to kick their addiction to bigotry, misogyny, and hubris. And, you know, the educated, the colored, the good faith members of this citizenry, we bail this person out of jail. We give them money, we give them a place to sleep. And yet, again and again, they rob us, they shame us, they come begging for more from us. And I think on Tuesday, a decisive course of action was made. And now we just have to watch our old beloved America hit rock bottom and climb out from it, hopefully. I don't know.
Well, when that happens, and if that happens, and if we can make that happen, one of the things that you worry about is that the bedrock on which this country is built, the Constitution, we have learned in the last several years is a gentleman's agreement. And one of the points you make is there are no gentlemen in the room.
There are no gentlemen in the room. And I think that the honor-bound preconceptions about how this all gets held up, the sort of surely not, nobody would let it devolve this far. Like, we have to just accept that we have moved past that as a country. I think that was one of the exhausting and heartbreaking things about watching people like John Kelly, like all of the major military leaders who signed that massive document saying that the president-elect is a danger to democracy. They took so long to say something, and I think that there are so many people. There's such a gulf of civic engagement and literacy, frankly, in this country right now that people, like well-meaning, less engaged Americans are watching television and they're going, well, surely if it were that bad and he were that dangerous, they would have stopped it by now, because they're trusting in some duty-bound, honor-bound sense of dignity that would protect them from America actually devolving past reason into the chaos, as we were talking about earlier. And I think we have entered into this uncharted territory of, you know, the Constitution was written for white men who owned property, and that's it. And the second we expand it past its parameters, we have to start thinking differently about how we apply it. And we have to start thinking differently about how we trust its capacity to govern more people than just the people it was written to govern.
When you talked about America as an old junkie that is addicted to bigotry, misogyny, and hubris, that hubris one is interesting. Tim Snyder makes this point. The hubris, and this may be apply to people who are not racists and bigots and misogynists, but this idea that it can't hit rock bottom, the idea that the guardrails will hold us up, the idea that we can't actually go as wrong as we might end up going, caused a lot of people to mark a ballot in a way that was not in their self-interest and not in this nation's self-interest.
You know, I couldn't agree with that more. And I'm guilty of that old American hubris myself. My dad was a conservative Republican himself. He was appointed by George W. Bush. He was the acting general counsel for the Army in 2001. Both of my grandfathers served their country. My dad's dad in World War II, my mom's dad in the Korean War. In my heart, I'm a big time patriot, but I think, and that hubris of that American exceptionalism that we have this gift of a system of government that cannot fail, that by the people, for the people. We think we're impervious to that kind of existential fracture, but I think that we have to also just begin to finally accept what all Black people and most women also know, that Americans, not necessarily all Americans, want all other Americans to have all of their American liberties. Mm-hmm. This country wasn't even built for everyone who lives here to have all of those liberties that are written in the Constitution. It's never been true. So we just have to figure out how we have to see if we all actually do want to make it true or not.
A lot of the things that cause people to vote for Donald Trump may be abstractions. One of them is not, and that's abortion, reproductive rights. Right. You have, I hope I'm not giving you any secrets, but you've struggled with this, with ectopic pregnancies. There's no ectopic pregnancy that is ever viable, can't be viable. But the things required to treat an ectopic pregnancy or IVF are in question. I mean, in Texas, if you have an ectopic pregnancy, you may not actually be able to get the treatment for it. This is not an abstraction for you, or millions of women, frankly.
No. And I think, for me, what was wild when I was going through it, my doctor, in order to cover her own legal space, had to speak to me about what was happening to my body in a way that was like, I will not over disclose, but it was literally traumatic to me, the way that I had to be told of what was happening to my body in order for my doctor to legally be able to cover herself to perform the procedure required to save my life. And then, I had the radical bad luck of having a second ectopic pregnancy happen, which means that I'm definitely going to need to pursue IVF. And with the rulings that have happened, with the ruling that just happened in Alabama earlier this year, and all of this question of fetal personhood and the question about how we store embryos and all of these things. I'm 37 years old. I want to be able to make conscientious, healthful, and hopeful plans. And as of Tuesday, because of the way that the Tennessee legislature keeps ruling things, my husband and I are literally going to have to do that outside of the state in order to feel confident in our plan making and in order to feel confident that the plans that we make now will still allow us to be within the parameters of the law and my physical safety in the future. To say nothing of the fact that as a Black woman in America, I'm already 3 to 4 times more likely to die trying to have a child than a white woman in the first place, which, speaking of systemic inequities and when people try to say that we don't have a race problem in this country, then explain to me why, even when accounting for socioeconomic status and education, I'm just more likely to die than all of my white friends.
Much to think about, Caroline. Thank you for sharing it with me. Thank you for the thoughts. And I know we'll see some of this hopefully in print, and we'll be able to make sense of it, on our own time as we look at it this week. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for letting me speak it out loud.
Caroline Randall Williams is the award-winning poet, essayist, and educator. She's the writer in residence at Vanderbilt University.